Good afternoon, councillors, officers, members of the public. Welcome along. I declare this meeting open. Under announcements, councillors, it's my intention to convene two public forums in the future. One of those will be held late May to consider the parking review report. Another one will be held late July to consider the Civic Cultural Precinct project. And just my usual declaration, fuel costs for the period of $70. Councillor Cook is on leave. I've heard nothing from Councillor Steck. Declarations of interest, we have those from Councillor Smith and myself. I also have one from Councillor Hayward on 10.2.3, as is a park runner, one of the items to be considered tonight. Are there any further declarations of interest, councillors? Public question time. We have questions submitted by Marina Quine, and I'll ask the CEO to respond to those questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll read out the questions. There are three responses to the three questions submitted by Ms. Quine. Question one is the South West Sports Centre user reference group the same as the South West Sports Centre advisory group, and when will the CEO report back to council regarding the terms of reference, membership and establishment of the advisory group committee as per council decision? Response: the South West Sports Centre user reference group has been established in accordance with Council Decision 2318, which resolved to 1. Note the elector's motion. I'll summarise these. 2. Agree that the provision of additional multi-use indoor courts at the South West Sports Centre be considered through the City of Bunbury Community Sport and Recreation Strategy. 3. In response to the elector's motion, City of Bunbury undertakes to develop a South West Sports Centre advisory committee to investigate the opportunities to provide additional multi-use indoor courts and report back to the community and council for consideration. 4. The CEO to compile the terms of reference and the membership of the committee and report back to council. The South West Sports Centre user reference group has been established to support items 2, 3 and 4 of the above decision. The group will consider the provision of additional multi-use indoor courts at the South West Sports Centre within the Community Sport and Recreation Strategy. This was discussed at the first South West Sports Centre's user group meeting on 27th of March 2018. The South West Sports Centre user group has been established to respond to the elector's motion. The investigation of opportunities to establish additional multi-use indoor courts will be considered through the Community Sport and Recreation Strategy. This will be developed with the community and reported back to council. The draft terms of reference were presented to the South West Sports Centre user group at the meeting on 27th of March and unanimously accepted. The membership of the group was also discussed and agreed at the same meeting. Response 2. The City is aware of the issues relating to basketball as per the information presented at the annual electors meeting on the 5th of December 2017 and as per item 10.2.3 of the Ordinary Council meeting of 23rd of January 2018. With regard to the issues raised regarding problematic scoreboards and Wi-Fi, quotes for replacement scoreboard are being sourced currently as part of Project PR 4096. The Wi-Fi was established as a member benefit for fitness group exercise and aquatic members. It was not provided as a free service for anyone using the South West Sports Centre, with coverage provided primarily within the foyer and fitness area. The service is not boosted to ensure complete coverage within the stadium. Response 3. The courts do not meet FIBA FIBA court size specifications, in brackets 1 metre short in length. The Sport and Recreation team are looking at options to see if extending the courts is possible within the existing stadium, and if so, the cost implications. A replacement scoreboard is due to be installed in the next 2 to 3 weeks. This, along with the associated wiring upgrade, should resolve the scoreboard concern. The Sport and Recreation team are working with the City's facilities team to look at costs and timing regarding the installation of LED lighting throughout the stadium. This may require to be considered as a separate project. Shot clocks have not been installed at the Sports Centre since the South West Slammers ceased using the facility. The Sport and Recreation team are investigating options and will determine the next steps once costs have been finalised.
Thank you. Those answers will be communicated in writing back to you. Confirmation of the previous council meeting. Also, I move we confirm those minutes. Councillor McGuell, is there a seconder? Councillor McCleary, all in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, we have a request from Jonathan Allen Dixon to speak to item 10.2.3. Those who agree, please indicate. That's agreed to. Are there any petitions, councillors? We move on to dealing with the business. Coming out for consideration are items 10.2.1, which is the budget review, requires an absolute majority, and 10.2.3, there are multiple executive recommendations plus Mr Dixon's deputation. And do we have any further items that councillors wish to consider? If not, can I, Councillor Hayward?
2.4.1, I've submitted an alternative executive recommendation for that one, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. We okay? So it leaves 10.2.2 and 10.2.4. Someone move those, please. Councillor McCleary, Councillor McGrill, all in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Ten two one. Someone prepared to move the executive recommendation? Councillor Hayward, Councillor McGuell. Is there likely to be any debate on this, councillors? Yes. Councillor Hayward.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to say first of all that I think the office has done a fantastic job in terms of being able to deliver the savings that have been identified in this report, and obviously this is just a normal part of the process of local government to review the budget and to put it through. So I'd urge councillors to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGuell. Speaker against, Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I will be speaking against the executive recommendation at item 10.21, which proposes to adopt the budget review, February 2018, and I will propose an alternative recommendation at the end. Firstly, I also wish to express my thanks to David Ransom and the Manager of Finance and the team for their enduring work on budgeting matters at the City. My opposition to the recommendation in question has nothing to do with their good work. And I speak against the item on the basis that a recent decision of this Council, Council Decision 7718, acquisition of 21 Wellington Street, also known as the South Building, was made by Council without disclosure that the source of the funds for the acquisition was subject to this February budget review. To support the budget review would be to validate the decision, a decision made without an important detail being provided, and that was the source of the funds from this review. And it's still my understanding, and I spoke to a number of councillors, that they didn't twig to the fact that the funds were to come from this budget review either. It's an important fact. That is, so in making decision 7718, at no time were we formally advised that the funds required from the Building Restoration and Maintenance Reserve to purchase Souths first had to be sourced from the budget review. That's my key point. Be it an oversight or an error or otherwise, I found it to be extraordinary that I wasn't aware of it, and I had to search for it. And I thought for at some stage I might have missed it, but I didn't. Council Decision 7718 depended upon the assumption that elected members would support the February budget review, which has to pass to enable funds totalling $1,153,000 to come from the 17-18 budget savings in order to top up the Building Restoration and Maintenance Reserve. And when I checked that reserve on the Friday after the Tuesday that we made decision 7718, I found it only had $311,000 in it. So why is this a problem? It's a problem because to be accountable members of council, we must have all of those facts made available to us in order to make the informed decisions. And they need to be relevant, accurate and timely facts, and I found that that wasn't the case. Unfortunately, the council was not made aware that a large portion of the funds needed to purchase Souths had to be sourced from this budget surplus, which we didn't know about at the time. All we were told was that the purchase of the site would be funded from the 17-18 budget, detailed in option 4, contained in the confidential due diligence report, and that this included money from the Building Restoration and Maintenance Reserve. So does this matter? Yes, it does, in that any decision that affects ratepayers, elected members are obliged to consider all available information to ensure that each option and every option is available and considered equally. For example, what would councillors have decided if they were told that $1.1153 million was from savings in the 17-18 budget might be available for other priority projects around the city? So here we have $1,153,000 that we've found in this document, February budget savings. The staff knew about it before the 20th, and yet we didn't. Assuming that the purchase of Souths was a fait accompli, would they have instead opted to borrow the money to purchase the property and use the budget surplus for other more pressing projects? And I name a few: shade sales, footpaths, or even a skate park. That is a decision I think rightly belongs to elected members. So what we should have had way back was the indication that this money was going to be found to be put into the Building Restoration Fund from this February review. We weren't told that, and we should have been. What is quite extraordinary is that the budget review was actually finished before the meeting that we had on the 20th to put forward decision 7718, which was to purchase Souths. Now, I don't know why elected members were not informed about the mechanics of the funding, and that's another forum. But what I am saying is by passing this tonight, we're validating a decision where we didn't have all of the information. So whatever the case, I'm asking councillors to vote no to the executive recommendation at item 10.21 and consider a new resolution. And it's firstly dropping the not, so it's council resolves not, actually adds the word not, council resolves not to adopt the February 2018 budget review as presented. And part two, the CEO is requested to review funding options for the acquisition of 21 Wellington Street and report back to council for a decision in the next round. Thank you very much.
Speaker, question? Yep.
Mr Mayor, what would be the impact in holding over or deferring this particular recommendation until the next round?
It'll be a significant matter for our finances, Councillor McCleary. Speaker 4. Councillor Hayward to close.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. Look, just a couple of things I just want to point out. Councillor Kelly I understand where he's coming from, but the difference is that when that decision around South was made, it was made on the basis of cocktail funding. So it listed a number of sources of income. One of those sources was the surplus, another was from the reserve. So it would have made no difference, absolutely no difference in terms of how the money was spent. So if you follow me there, the decision the council made in relation to South allowed the city to access the money from the surplus and from the reserve. So this budget review, by moving surplus money into a reserve, is a transaction that makes absolutely no difference. If that transaction didn't happen, that cash would still be available because of the decision that our council has already made. So I think it's important to understand that. So why I am sympathetic to some of Councillor Kelly's concerns. The reality is what we're faced with right now would make no difference. And on that basis, I think we can confidently support this review. It is our responsibility under the Local Government Act to review our budget, and as elected members, that's our job to do. So I'd encourage you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. This requires an absolute majority, which is 7. Those in favour, please indicate. Those against? That's carried. Councillor Kelly, McCleary and Steele vote against. The rest were for. Thank you. Mr Dixon. Welcome. You have... Thank you. Starting now.
I've got a bit of a convoluted lot of questions and comments to make. I'll probably start with the very first one, being that comes straight from the agenda of the council meeting. It simply states at the very front, which talks about accountability and lots of other issues. It also says innovation, the very last one, which states continually improving our services and processes through creative, progressive thinking and action. And that's what I'd like to bring really to the agenda today. Being, for example, that I go past the Bunbury Recreation Centre quite a few mornings, and I noticed there's a fantastic piece of equipment hammer throwing, and I don't know anyone that does discus shot put like hammer throwing in Bunbury. I know he's got a bucket load of money on that piece of equipment for something which I don't think anybody actually uses. So then I bring it back to what we're doing so far right now, council.
Present, is that we're spending a bucket load of time and money on surveys. And I get a little bit concerned when I read that some of the surveys are only 20, 30 youths, of which 60% of them don't even live in Bunbury, straight off the website. Another one, which is the Precinct Committee Consultation Summary and Findings, which stated that over 50% of respondents were above the age of 50. And I look at all the other surveys, they're all above 50, 55 and 60 years of age. If we keep using these surveys, I think we'll have the best aged care facilities and wheelchair facilities in Bunbury, and nothing for teenagers at this rate. So I refer that back to something that's in the agenda for today, and I wish I could find it from the Mayor, which states something like putting it back in the hands of the Youth Advisory Committee. Well, I've met with the Youth Advisory Committee on 3 occasions, and the Youth Advisory Committee are fantastic at putting on events. I've been to one of their events. I saw Betty at one of those events. Absolutely sensational. Another one on this weekend. I think their ability to actually work on a skate park is well beyond their realms of probably their scope of what they're doing. I probably wouldn't denigrate them saying their intelligence, but definitely the scope of the work that they need to be doing. I see we have an agenda here to knock back the $1 million for a proposed skate park. And we could sit here and look at surveys for the rest of our lives, but I actually had another survey which I picked up recently which states that there was a 100% acceptance of a water park in Bunbury a few years ago, and we still don't have a water park. So I'm not too sure how we're going here with the council. Are we using surveys, councillors? Or are we not using surveys? Or are we skewing those questions when we put those surveys out to get the answers that we are after? A la, if I put a survey out and said, I would like Coca-Cola, like you're drinking there, sir, in every fountain in Bunbury, I reckon I'd get a pretty close to 100% respondents saying yes. And beer, from me, yes as well. So if we put out a survey stating, would we like to have a skate park in Bunbury, I think the response would be 100% probably yes. Does that mean we need to build it? I don't know. That's what we voted for you guys for. That's what we asked you guys to do. That's why we send out and have these $1,000 spent on these elections, just have you guys to go out and actually speak to your people in your electorate. Don't result on surveys. Surveys are done by people that are more than likely unemployed, bored and above the age of 55. And that's what you'll be getting back here at council. If you put in a survey which states, would you like to spend $16.5 million on a new precinct in town? I reckon your response could be zero. Is that right or wrong? I don't know. If you skew that question the way you want it, you can make it sound as though it's the worst thing in the world. Or you can say, would you like to have the best Bunbury or precinct in the world? And people would say, yes, 100%. I would just like our council and councillors to be very, very, very wary of the surveys and the questions that you put out to the general public and who they're going to via email. Email can be a very dangerous thing. Surveys on Facebook, very dangerous things. I could bring up my 1,000 plus people there in a nice little petition today and present it to council. Is that true? Really? I've got over 1,000 people that want a skate park here in Bunbury. Youth Advisory Committee, they know that. Did they present that to you as well? I was told to give it to Youth Advisory. Did they want to present it? And I think worried about doing Shift this weekend. There's a little event on this weekend called Shift. That's what they're trying to do. So really, what I'd like our councillors to do is to close their eyes just a little bit and think about all those newspaper reports you've seen in the last 6 or 12 months and just name me every single one of those towns that has a skate park being built right now. Not based upon a survey, not based upon this, not based upon that, based upon the councillors actually probably getting off their butt and going around this beautiful state of ours and thinking, what in the hell would make this city look great? What would be great for the youth of Bunbury? Because it also states in here, continually improving our service and process through creative and progressive thinking and action. I go back to some of your surveys. Should we use our surveys? I don't know, but some of them actually do state that the questions have been skewed towards the elderly, and it states that obviously the youth are being actually not attended to. So here it is. It states in here.
Mr. Dixon, 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Oh, can I just conclude for 1 second? I'd just like to knock back that motion.
I think he
Councillor Stack. Thank you.
He wanted 1 second, I think.
I'll wrap it up. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I do get a bit carried away, as you might know, just pretty well, sir. I'd like to wrap it up by saying I really think that no matter what your opinion is about a skate park, you might hate it, you might love it, but if you don't vote for a skate park, I would ask you as a councillor to write to those councils that have approved the skate park and say, hey, I'm from Bunbury City Council, I reckon you're wrong. I reckon you're wrong, Rockingham. I reckon you're wrong, Kwinana. I reckon you're wrong, Margaret River. I reckon you're wrong, Capel. I reckon you are wrong, Collie. I reckon you're wrong, Australind. I reckon you are wrong, Margaret River. I said them already. Capel have got one coming up. Busselton have got one already, which I was there yesterday. There were over 50 people there yesterday when I drove back from surfing down the coast.
30 seconds.
Thank you, Mayor. I would conclude in saying that it is about time this council voted for the best skate park in the southwest to put Bunbury on the map and to do something for the teenagers of Bunbury, which constitute about 20% of our population and are not represented in one survey that I've looked at so far on your website. I could be wrong, and maybe my research isn't as deep as what it should be, but I implore you that we need to act now and not wait for another year to get this on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Dixon. Councillor, we move to 10.2.3.
Excuse me, sir, can I ask him a question?
No, Councillor Steck, you know that. What I'm going to do, councillors, with this, we've got 28 recommendations here, and as I indicated last week at our briefing, I'm going to seek a mover and a seconder for them on block, but I'm going to deal with each one individually. So if you wish to vote against or debate against any of these recommendations, that opportunity will be given to you. Councillor Hayward.
So just a point of clarification there, Mr Mayor. You're saying that we are going to have the opportunity to debate on each item, or
Yes.
that we move all the items and have to speak now and then vote?
No, I'll go through and debate each item,
Okay.
but I'm just
Okay.
trying to make it simple for our minute taker to have a single mover and a seconder. Are you moving?
I'm happy to move pro forma.
Pro forma. Is there a seconder pro forma? Councillor Miguel. So, councillors, we'll move on. Executive recommendation 1, that's the recommendation. Is there anybody who wishes to speak against that? I'll put it all in favour. That's carried unanimously. Recommendation 2, is there anybody who wishes to speak against that recommendation? I'll put it all in favour. That's carried. Recommendation 3, speakers against?
Yes,
Councillor
Mr
Kelly.
Mayor. Mr Mayor, when I looked at the Bunbury Geograph Steering Group Alliance membership, I had to wonder why, with the wisdom that we have within our council and the wisdom in other councils, why we have to contribute to another group to the extent of $25,000 per annum. I think that in the raising of groups together, they should be able to be done at a senior level with executive staff and the leaders of this council, that's yourself, Mr Mayor, in a matter of course. I don't believe that we should be spending $25,000 per annum on this group when it can be done as a matter of a normal committee out of the time that either yourself, the CEO, or any member of the council who put their hand up to do it at the time that they put aside to their council duties. So I'll speak against Executive Recommendation 3 and urge councillors not to support that one. Thank you.
Speaker 4. I'll speak for it. Councillors, this Bunbury Geograph Steering Group Alliance, at the moment, there is a process of merging the Bunbury Wellington Economic Alliance with the Bunbury Geograph Steering Committee, and that's been ongoing for some months now. And the city has been part of the Bunbury Geograph Steering Committee for the past 12 months or a bit longer, and we actually resolved last financial year to have membership in that group, and I think we funded about $20,000 for our annual membership to that group, which employs employs its own staff. It has its own operating costs. It does a lot of lobbying on behalf of the Bunbury Geograph region rather than just purely the city of Bunbury. So our role in that is to be part of it, to provide input, to share and collaborate with our neighbouring local governments. And the new alliance being considered includes quite a lot of the major industries within the Bunbury Geograph area, so I'd urge you to support this one. Further speaker against? Councillor Steele.
In previous years, we've actually had BWA come and do briefings with us. I'm surprised that the Bunbury Geograph Steering Group haven't come and given us a briefing so we actually can ask them questions. Is there any reason why they didn't?
I'm just trying to think if there has been, during the process of the Bunbury Geograph Growth Plan being prepared, there are several workshops where members of elected members were always all invited to attend those workshops, and that was to prepare the actual growth plan itself. But I've been attending those meetings. Councillor Miguel has attended one of those. Our CEO is not a member of the actual steering committee, but the CEOs of the neighbouring local governments are party to that as well, but that can be easily arranged, Councillor Steele. Question?
Excuse me,
Councillor
sir. Who is part of this steering committee?
The Bunbury Geograph Steering Committee includes the City of Bunbury, Shire of Capel, Shire of Dardanup, Shire of Harvey, the Southern Ports Authority, the South West Development Commission, the Bunbury Geograph Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Regional Development Australia Chair. I think that's about it. Is there a speaker against this?
So then, sir, can I have another question,
Sure.
please? Given the information you just provided, why is it then that we need to pay the sum of $25,000 for a group of collected councils who meet together quite regularly through WALGA, that we need to find something alternative for $25,000? What is the objective for the $25,000?
The objective is to implement the growth plan, which is different to WALGA. It's not a WALGA project. It's one of the major projects we're looking at the moment is the Water for Food program, which is about a $200 million project involving Collie, Harvey Water. The state government has committed 38 million, I think 37 million to that. That's one of the major projects. There are several projects underway, Council Steck, including the Forest Industries Alliance. So there are a lot of projects underway, and that plan has been with us for over 12 months, and it was widely publicised. Speaker against? Further speaker against? I'll put it. That's the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation, please indicate. Those against? That's carried. Against was Councillor Morris, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Steele and Steck, I think. Yep. Recommendation 4, is there anyone wishes to speak against that? I'll put it all in favour. That's carried unanimously, thank you. Recommendation 5, speakers against. Councillor McCleary.
Moving on. All right, Mr. Mayor.
You okay?
Yep.
So I'll put it all in favour. That's carried unanimously. Recommendation 6, anyone who wishes to speak against that? I'll put it all in favour. That's carried unanimously, thank you. Recommendation 7, speakers against. I'll put it all in favour. That's carried unanimously. Recommendation 8, any speaker against?
Just questions.
Councillor McCleary.
Mr. Mayor, when would you be expecting when were you going to be expecting a report from the Senior Citizens Meals and Wells, please?
Yep, so I'll ask the CEO if you can respond to that question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had a group of professionals do a review report on the operations of the Bunbury Seniors Centre. That report has been provided now to the board and the general manager of the centre. Staff have met with them, and they are to come back to us over the next month, and then we'll bring a report back to council probably towards the end of this financial year. We have made the allocation within the IFP, given that there may be a need to continue to provide some level of support for the Bunbury Senior Centre.
Is there a speaker against this? I'll put it all in favour. That's carried unanimously, thank you. Recommendation 9, any speakers against? I'll put it all in favour. It's carried unanimously, thank you. Recommendation 10, speakers against? I'll put it all in favour. It's carried unanimously, thank you. Recommendation 11, Speaker against that recommendation? I'll put it. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Twelve. Speakers against? I'll put it. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Recommendation 13. Speaker against? I'll put it. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Recommendation 14.
I'd speak against.
Councillor Hayward.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. Just in relation to the skate park, I did send a note around and let councillors know that I was looking for an alternative recommendation in this space. I think that there is no question. I've had a look around in the last few weeks at places like Manjimup, Busselton, and Margaret River. All of these places have brought online either new skate parks this year or very recently. 20 years ago, we were the first people pretty much, I think, to have a skate park in the southwest. It's a fantastic investment. I reckon it's probably some of the best bit of concrete ever invested in by the city. It's absolutely worn out. The kids down there are using it consistently. And if you go to these other towns, you'll see that there is constantly a crowd of young people around these skate parks, and it's not the antisocial behaviour that perhaps was involved in kids skating when I was a young fella. They're a lot more proactive, and there's some really great youth work happening in this space as well. I think that there has been a very loud community outcry for this to be done. We've obviously heard some frustrations from Mr Dixon tonight, but the reality is that there are a lot of young people that we could be engaging. My alternative recommendation, if I get the opportunity to put it, will see $50,000 put forward by the city to do the initial consultation and design work so that we have a very clear idea about what's being sought and what money it will cost and enable us to get to the next stage. If we miss this opportunity at this point, we'll be another year behind, and I think that would be a very disappointing outcome. So I'd encourage you councillors to vote this down and then consider the alternative. Thank you.
Speaker 4. Oh, Councillor Morris.
19 years ago, I came to this council and was asked to join YAC as the chairperson. And I came across a group of young people who were extremely enthusiastic about getting a skate park, to the point in which they actually did most of the legwork of building that skate park. What we were told tonight was that they really had nothing to do with it. That's not the case. I saw those young people take it from step one to the inn and even the landscaping of that when it wasn't even in the budget. But they found that they needed extra work, and they made a delegation coming to this council asking for extra funds for that and gave the reasons why. I think we're short-circuiting a group of young people in relation to what they would want, what they would need. I believe that the YAC have the right and the responsibility to be able to come to this council and ask this council what they want. It's been a long time. Yes, we probably do need another skate park updated. But I want to see YAC being able to be the force behind it, and the representatives are young people. Thank you.
Speaker against, Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I love Bunbury, and I'd hate to have it have a reputation of being a talk fest. We have been talking about several wonderful projects for our community, and in the 5 years that I've been here, there's not a lot of the bigger ones that have come and been completed. So I would recommend, as Councillor Hayward's done, but I'm a little bit more heavy-handed. I would like my alternative to say that council include a skate park project at the cost of $1 million in the 2018-19 budget. That's what I would like to put forward, because we really do have the money. We've been told we have the money, or we can seek out the money to actually build this. Now, the YAC, I was on the YAC committee, fantastic people, they do a wonderful job. To once again put them in a position of going back and discussing this with our YAC, really, they don't skate. It's normally a different type of group of people who are out there skating. And whether those people would come to a YAC meeting or not, probably not, but they would go down the skate park. And also, once they congregate down there, you can get people like friends of the police down there talking to the children, having incidental talks with them. And I think this is a really wonderful opportunity for Bunbury to bring their children together in a bonding area and to actually know where they are. So that would be my alternate recommendation tonight. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, can I get Mrs McCleary or Councillor McCleary to read that recommendation? Otherwise this is not a motion. Thank you.
What Councillor McCleary indicated then, Councillor Steck, was that it was her intention to provide an alternative, but we have an alternative motion there at the moment.
Well, within the rules, sir, I'd still like her to read the motion out, sir.
Do you have it
I'm
ready?
happy to.
Do you have it ready there, Councillor?
I have. Thank you, Mr Mayor. And my recommendation is Council include the skate park project at a cost of $1 million in the 2018-19 budget. Thank you.
I'll second that motion
No,
if it passes, sir.
there's no need to at this stage, Councillor Steck. We're still dealing with Executive Recommendation 14. As a further speaker for the Executive Recommendation, I'll speak for it. As has been indicated by others, we have asked the Youth Advisory Committee to look at this matter. I understand from the CEO that they are working towards that. They will prepare a business case, I would expect, and that can come back to us for consideration for funding and how it's to be funded. There's no business case at the moment for $1 million skate park. It may be far more than that, it may be far less than that. We haven't looked at options to upgrade or modify the existing skate parks. We have two in Bunbury that I think everybody's aware of. And to include this project at this stage is early. I'm quite happy to support Councillor Hayward's alternative, but at the moment I'm supporting that we defer including this project in the 18-19 period. Is there a further speaker against Councillor Warnock?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold, so bear with me. But this $50,000 that Councillor Hayward suggests would actually kickstart this project, and Sean Smith, the...
Point of order, sir. We're discussing the Council Executive recommendation, not Councillor Hayward's motion, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Steck. I think Councillor Warnock is aware of that and is probably getting around to it, aren't you?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. So I would speak against this because I think we need to give Councillor Hayward's motion the opportunity to get up, which would allow this project to get started. And as he said, you know, otherwise we would be held back a further year. So I'd urge councillors to vote against this. Thank you.
Is there a speaker for? I'll put it. All those in favour of deferring this or Executive Recommendation 14, please indicate. Those against? That's lost. Councillor Hayward has put up an alternative. Is there a seconder? Councillor Brown, Councillor Hayward.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. Look, I think the other proposed recommendation is quite exciting as well that's being proposed. There's no doubt about that at all. But I think the point is that even if we had $1 million in the budget, we probably wouldn't spend it in the next 12 months because there is a process to go through. So I think that if we can support this, we can get the $50,000. The other thing I just wanted to say as well is that I actually spoke to Sean Smith, our youth mayor, today, and I have his full support. He's very excited about the prospect of some money being made available so that he and the stakeholders can start working through that process. So I would encourage you to support it and get this project underway. Thank you.
Councillor Brown. Speaker against. Councillor Steck.
Funny enough, I was first elected to council in 2001 in Collie, and there's been recent reports in the newspaper about how long I've been a councillor for. And I have been a councillor for longer than most people have, and in fact the longest serving councillor member in this room. And what I will say is simply this: every single year the skate park comes up, and I really love the presentation from the gentleman this evening, because that was passion, that was serious passion. And that's what gets things done in this community, is passion from the community members themselves. And many of us start with the best intentions in this council, and we always get weary sometimes, and you can't deny that. And I'll speak for myself in that particular instance. Because I have put up a skate park a few times, I've put up a few other things, and I can remember the young gentleman who was 11 years old who came here before council and said, "Can I have a skate park at Glen Iris?" And one of the deputy mayors said, "Don't jump the queue, mate, get in line for the budget." That was his exact reply to that 11-year-old son. And I know for a fact that I've dealt with many people in this community who want a skate park, and there has been nothing for teenagers for a very, very long time. We have been very, very remiss, very remiss. Because if you don't play sport, and not all families can play sport because they all can't afford it. And if you don't swim, and if you don't ride a bike, what do you do in this city? What do you do? And I've heard passionate pleas from Councillor Morris in this room on many occasions about how skate parks are a wonderful facility for teenagers, about comradeship, about building team players and building the pecking order of how you be a reasonable human being. And it's a really good sport, very, very pro-fitness, and is now becoming an elite sport as I can see it. So I would say that I'm actually going to vote for Mrs McCleary's and Councillor McCleary's motion. Yes, the $1 million is a point in the dark, but what I want to do is I want to reserve it, because I know from Scarborough and I know from everywhere else that the skate parks have been an absolute winner for every single community who have put them in their communities. And, I don't need to speak rhetoric. I just need to appeal to you and appeal to your better judgment to go, well, hang on. We can make a difference and we can make a change, even if it's the most simplest thing is bringing up a skate park. And it's all about numbers on the books, and we can do it. It's not hard. I urge you to support Councillor McCleary's motion.
Speaker for Councillor Hayward's motion, Councillor Kelly. That's seconded by Councillor Brown, by the way. You've got that? Yep.
Yes, Mr Mayor. Look, I too agree with Councillor Steck about Councillor McCleary's motion, but I'm also very much aware of the numbers in the chamber, and we need 7. We need 7 to do something rather than just to lapse into nowhere land. Councillor Hayward's alternative motion supports the planning community consultation elements of it by putting $50,000 aside from July 1. And knowing the efficient council staff we have, from July 1 it'll only take them 4 weeks to get the 50 grand spent and a design for a skate park and the busy work that needs to be done to get the location and everything else done to get the $1 million or more in the 2019-20 budget, because it's a long time overdue. I know that I got the feeling that to try and get $1 million into this budget is going to be a hard one, but to get the $50,000 into it, I think we can get 7 people over the line on this so that we can allocate it, and that will involve getting a whole bunch of people who have done so much work to date over how many years I don't know. It's been quite a while since we first saw Mr Dixon in the gallery, and again tonight he's persistent, I would say. So by supporting the $50,000 that Councillor Hayward has suggested, it means that we can take an orderly process towards making sure that not only have we got an allocation to start work on it, but we can get all of the elements that we need to put together to ensure that it does happen in an orderly fashion, so that when we meet again same time next year for the 2019-20 budget, there will be no excuse, there will be no running away, there will be no reason for us not to provide a substantial amount of funds for this new skate park. If we can spend millions on buying buildings, we can certainly spend $1 million or more investment in the youth of the parish. So encourage councillors to support the alternative motion as it is.
Thank you. Speaker against?
I actually have a
Councillor
question,
Steele.
please. It's
Question?
Yes, the $1 million that's been set aside for the water park, what are the, so before we actually say yes or no to this, can we not just transfer it through to maybe Councillor McCleary's, because this is, to me, we're looking at that destination park, not just the skate park. So is the $1 million that we have already set aside for about 4 years for the water park, can that be transferred through over in this budget to a destination park?
The water park is still a project that hasn't been finalised yet, Councillor Steele. So the answer is no. Speaker,
A motion to do that, we can do that. So the answer is not quite no, is it?
Councillor Steck, Councillor Steele asked me if we could transfer the $1 million we have in the budget for borrowings for a water park. My response was that water park project is yet to be finalised, so we still need that money reserved for that purpose. Is there a speaker against? Councillor Hayward to close.
Look, thanks very much, Mr Mayor. Look, I would encourage all councillors to support it. It is a start. As I say, even if there was $1 million in the budget today, it wouldn't be spent straight away, because there's a process that needs to go through. So I agree with Councillor Kelly that it'd be a tough ask for us to get $1 million through the budget. I think we can all get this through. So I just encourage you to support it. When we can get underway, that'd be great. Thank you.
I'll put it all in favour, please indicate. Those against? 1, that's 2, that's carried. Thank you. Thank you. We move on to 15. Anyone wish to speak against that? Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I believe that the city the size of Bunbury should have its only museum open on a Sunday. A lot of people still have, say, Saturday and Sunday as their day off. A lot of visitors come to town. I live in town and I've seen people just wandering around with nothing to do on Sundays in Bunbury, and I think that's a shame. Years ago, the gallery was told it had to have 7-day trading, and we managed that and did it, and it still has 7-day trading. So I believe the museum should be no different and should be open on a Sunday. I'm not adverse to closing on Monday or Tuesday or perhaps another day, but I just think weekends it should be open on both days. Thank you.
Speaker 4. I'll put the executive recommendation. Those in favour, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against? 3, 4. That's lost. We move on to recommendation 16. Speaker against that recommendation? I'll put it all in favour. Please indicate. Those against? 1 against, that's carried. Recommendation 17. Anyone wish to speak against that?
Just a quick question, if I may, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Howard.
I believe that last year we passed a motion that said that we would increase, I think, 2 kilometres per year in footpath. 1 kilometre per year, that's it. I just wondered how that's going, whether this recommendation has the money to continue that extra 1 kilometre a year.
So your question is, can the city dedicate $2 million per year?
No, sorry, Mr Mayor, I haven't been clear. So we already passed a motion that we would grow our network 1 kilometre per year.
Yeah.
I'm just confirming that that's still that's still the case. We're still doing that. That's what I'm asking.
Oh, I see, yeah, okay, I'll ask the CEO to respond to that.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, the long-term financial plan has an allocation made in it for an additional 1 kilometre per year. This was a request for an additional 1 kilometre per year.
Does anyone wish to speak against this? Councillor
Mayor.
Kelly.
Pathways, probably the most important thing in Bunbury as we get towards people exercising, fighting the obesity epidemic, getting people out and about, walking, bicycling, skating, or riding on the little scooters. I think, again, where's our priorities? If we're really going to be concerned about the people of Bunbury, we should be providing things that are real, tangible now. And the expansion of the path networks was put there simply because we've restricted ourselves to 1 kilometre come hell or high water. I think we need to be a little bit braver in this space because path networks around Bunbury, essentially a flat city, are important to the way we grow, important to the way we attract people to get around. I think Executive Recommendation 17, I'd like to foreshadow the recommendation, but omitting the word not support the increase to council support the increase. I think councillors, where's our priorities? Exercise people, getting around the town. I think if we start to invest our ratepayers' funds in tangibles, then I think we're doing everybody a favour. So encourage executive recommendation, encourage councillors to vote against it as it is, and I'll foreshadow council support the increase. Thank you.
Speaker 4. I'll put it all in favour, please indicate. Those against? That's lost. Councillor Kelly, you wanted to foreshadow?
The motion is just to delete the word not.
I second that, Mr Mayor.
So this is actually a budget matter now, so it requires an absolute majority. The only way around that, Councillor Kelly, is council considers supporting the increase in the budget. It's up to you.
So, Mr Mayor, just a word of explanation on that. If council considers supporting the increase in the budget for the expansion, etc., what happens is that the budget is redrawn with that figure in it, and then it comes to full council when the budget is due for ratification. Is
Correct.
that the case?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, Mr Mayor, in that case, that would be fair. Council considers support the increase in the budget. Yes.
You happy with that, Councillor McCreary?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor.
So, Councillor Kelly, do you wish to speak?
I've said it, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, excuse me, Councillor McCreary.
Just the wording will need to change. If Councillor Kelly is just proposing an increase of $260,000,
Yep.
the
Yep.
balance of those numbers will need to come out.
Yep. Thank you, Mr CEO. So, Councillor Kelly, you following that rationale? Councillor Kelly?
Mr Mayor, the CEO has reassured me that the expansion of the path networks of 260,000 each year from 2018-19 to 2021 each year, okay, will bring us 2 kilometres.
Okay.
That's the assurance that, and I see Mr Harris nodding sagely there. So that will suffice, Mr Mayor. Yes.
Yeah, okay. You're okay with that?
I would like to see something relating to the 2 kilometres in there. Just to be sure, I'm Irish, what can I say? Okay, per year. I would like to have some reference to that because the way it reads now, we're over Ed Rover in 2019.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the details on page 31 of the agenda item indicates There's enough allocation within the existing budgets and long-term financial plan for 1 kilometre of new footpaths per annum as per the current council resolution. Councillor Kelly's motion would provide doubling of those funds, and it therefore goes without saying that would be 2 kilometres.
Just a question, only doubling it for the 2018-19 budget though?
No, it says there each year, Councillor McCleary, in the last line.
Oh, sorry, yep, okay, I'm looking
We
at
okay with the mover and the seconder? Okay, so Councillor Kelly, you're happy you've spoken for it. Councillor McCreary, do you wish to support it?
Just a quick one, because we haven't really made reference to our elderly and our aged people, and I believe that we do have a lot of residents that are aged, and we really do need these footpaths for them with their little go-karts getting along, and it's uneven. So to be able to have this money, to be able to increase the footpaths for our aged would be fantastic. Thank you.
Speaker against? I'll put it all in favour. Please indicate. Those against? 1, that's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 18, is there any speaker against?
Yes,
Councillor
Mr Mayor,
Kelly.
I'm very keen on the shade sales in public open space. One of the biggest, so I'll be speaking against this one, again taking the word not out, and no cricket pun. Council support the increase in expenditure on PR 3557 from 50 to 80,000. One of the most common elements of discussion around the city in every community strategic plan and every survey that I've seen for a long time is shade. It is a regular top 3 in priorities in the city. We want more shade, we want more shade. I think that the $30,000 from 50 to 80 is a modest amount to continue on the pathway to making us a very sun-smart city, given that we live in a part of the world where the sun shines for a long time every day in summer. So installing shade sales, I think, should be a priority for this council, and I propose ask councillors to vote against Executive Recommendation 18 and take the word not out, and then put council support the increase, and the rest is as is. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Is there speaker 4?
No, sorry, sir, can I just ask a question?
Yep.
Thank you. Given the fact that we're looking at $50,000 to $80,000 for a couple of shade sales, and I have it on good authority, sir, that some trees are worth at least a minimum of $45,000 under the planning scheme in the city, why are we not identifying and planting trees for the amount of $50,000 instead of sales?
Well, Councillor Stick, one of the examples would be Children's Playground, which haven't got any shade sale protection at the moment. That's why you need the shade sales, and planting a tree won't work in that instance, but that's just, that's the key areas we're looking at with the public congregate. Is there a speaker?
Sorry, sir, an extra question to that response that you gave. So you're saying trees don't work for shade?
No, I didn't say that at all.
Well, why aren't we trying to identify the cost of trees that are mature trees that you can transplant?
Yeah, that's okay. Councillor Stick, all I can guide you is to vote against this. Is there a speaker for the recommendation? I'll put it all in favour, please indicate. 1. Those against? 9. 10 against. Councillor Kelly, you have foreshadowed that council considers not supporting.
No, Mr Mayor, because this is only a $30,000 figure, I'd just like to leave as is, support the increase in expenditure in PR 3557 from 50 to 80. It is only a modest amount. If $30,000 has to come back off forecast surplus, then so be it. $30,000 in the context of the budget is not as significant as the other was. So I believe that in good sense, councillors will vote in the majority for this one, and we'll be moving on. Thank you.
Is there a seconder to that one? Councillor Steele. Speaker against? Oh, sorry, Councillor Steele, did you wish to speak? Speaker against? I'll put it all in favour, please indicate. Those against? 1, that's carried. Recommendation 19, anyone wish to speak against this? Councillor Smith.
I'm speaking against this motion because it's a small amount and I believe that the band is an invaluable community asset. Can you imagine if we didn't have a volunteer band? We'd have to hire a band to play at our civic functions that cost a lot more than $8,000. So it's just a modest increase. It's not just the band itself, they've got the instruments to maintain. Even just looking after their sheet music is a massive task. So I think it would be in the spirit of the city and our support for the band to increase this by $2,000 a year. Thank you.
And Councillor Smith, do you wish to foreshadow an alternative?
Yes, Mr Mayor,
Okay.
that the council support an increase of contribution from $8,000 to $10,000.
Okay, thank you. Is the Speaker for the recommendation? I'll put it all in favour. Those who agree, please indicate. Those against? That's lost. Councillor Smith has foreshadowed a motion that Council supports an increased contribution from 8,000 to 10,000 each year of the IFP. Is there a seconder? Councillor Steele. Do you wish to speak any further on it, Councillor Smith?
No, Mr Mayor, I think I've
Councillor
said...
Steele. I'll put it all in favour, please indicate. Those against? It's carried unanimously, actually. Thank you. On
Please.
what?
Sorry, but the museum opening hours, should we have foreshadowed an alternative motion then to deal with that matter?
Well, that matter will come back to us in the future, Councillor Warnock. Councillor recommendation number 20. Speaker against, Councillor Smith.
Yes, Mr Mayor. One of my favourite sayings is that nobody ever remembers who Mozart's accountant was, or Picasso's accountant, but they remember the works, and they remember the place where they are. When I first joined the collection committee as a very young woman, the amount that the committee got from the city was $2,000, and that lasted for several years. With that $2,000 through judicious work and research, we managed to grow this asset to something that's worth several $1 million today. In those days, you could pick and choose, and you could sort of back artists who you thought were going to make it in the art world and to be important artists in this state and the rest of the country. You can't do that so much now. To buy a work from a recognised artist, you're looking at $10,000 at least. Bunbury is really behind all other councils and shires who have a bigger budget than that. The other thing is, with $15,000, you don't have the ability, if you see a work at auction somewhere, to fill a gap in the collection. You don't have the facilities or the flexibility to buy that. So that's why I think that this should be extended, even if it was extended a little bit each year, maybe not by $10,000, maybe incrementally $5,000 each year to build it up to a decent amount. And if this recommendation is not back, I would foreshadow that the increase be to $20,000. Thank you.
Speaker for the recommendation. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please indicate. Those against? For those against? That's lost. Councillor Smith, you foreshadowed that Council supports the increase in expenditure from $15,000 to $20,000 in 18-19.
Yes, Mr Mayor, thank you.
Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kelly seconded that. Did you have a question? Yeah, please, go ahead.
Is there any chance of ordering that to 20,000? 25 to 20,000?
That's just what we've done. This is Councillor Smith's motion here. Yeah, Councillor Smith has just foreshadowed, she foreshadowed that the amount would go to 20,000. Councillor Smith, do you wish to speak to this further?
No, I think I explained why my rationale behind this, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much.
Councillor Kelly?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I think a good move from Councillor Smith. The fact is that we have a marvellous collection, and let's hope that we can show it a bit more often. There's a lot of it sitting back in that back room, but it gives us a little bit of flexibility when pieces come on the market. pieces relevant to Bunbury, and it also ensures with the judicious purchase that it may not be all spent in 1 year, but certainly we should be looking at enhancing what we've got in our art collection. I think this is modest enough, so I support it.
Speaker against? I'll put it all in favour, please indicate. That's carried unanimously, thank you. Recommendation number 21, is there a speaker against? Councillor
I've
Kelly.
got a question first. I just got to get clarified in my head. Why was there no figure put in this at all? Was there some suggestion that it would just become a project with a notional amount in the budget while we basically looked at what we needed to do with Marcia funding, etc.?
Look, Councillor Kelly, I'll ask the CEO to respond, but my recollection is that there was not a figure indicated from Morrissey as to the amount they were looking for, and there was an arbitrary figure, but I will ask the CEO to give you better information than that.
Only a little, Mr Mayor. This was a councillor request that was submitted of the figure of $40,000, and the officer's comment is that the $40,000 would not get the playground in the first instance, and there's probably some higher priority areas at this stage.
So is there a speaker against this, Councillor
Sorry, sir,
Steck?
can I just ask a question, given the CEO's response? For the life of me, I can't recall, but I do remember there was a staff document that showcased, Mel, I think, the hierarchy of playgrounds or something like that. And if I'm wrong, can you enlighten me? I think I do recall reading a document like that, and therefore I'm just questioning where this actually is placed on that document, sir.
CEO?
Through Mr Mayor, the public open space strategy is being reviewed as we speak, and that will be coming back to council, so that will provide the hierarchy not only for the playgrounds and parks, but other public open space throughout the city, and that's been done at the same time as the recreation strategy, so they'll go hand in hand, and that'll provide council with details on where each park sits in the hierarchy.
So, Councillor Kelly,
got another question just to make sure that we've got our heads around this. Going back to executive recommendation, let me see, where are we? Number 10, upgrading facilities. We've put in 100,000 per annum in those 4 years. Now, one would assume that upgrading facilities to meet the objective of becoming the Marcia would include allocations from that money perhaps to accessible playgrounds. My question is if executive recommendation is passed, not support, including the Lake Morrissey accessible playground, there is still an option for Lake Morrissey accessible playground to be considered under the executive recommendation 10. And also, the second part of my question is it possible to put this project in with a notional amount of $1 so that it sits there on the basis that if we're able to leverage funds from elsewhere, from matching it with executive recommendation 10, we could then transfer whatever funds that we need from 10 and whatever money we can leverage and put into an existing project which would sit there until such time as the funds are available. So 2 parts.
Yeah, Councillor Kelly, your suggestion has merit. Again, with the CEO, I'm not sure if he wishes to invite the Director of Works to make comment whether this Lake Morrissey playground is actually in the list of projects that he's looking at for the future. Maybe you'll start with that question.
So there's 2 parts, I think, Mr Mayor. The first part is that through number 10 on the items tonight, there's a report will come back through our date committee which will prioritise works to be done from the audits of our facilities that have been done to date. And then the second part is playgrounds and how playgrounds might fit into this scenario. So I'll probably defer that part to the Director to give some further definition around what's actually at Morrissey or close to Lake Morrissey now and what's planned for the future.
Thanks, Mr Harris.
Through you, Mr Mayor. In regards to the public open space strategy, the public open space strategy is looking at existing playgrounds around the place and looking at the catchment areas of existing playgrounds and then looking for where the gaps are in our provision of playgrounds throughout the city of Bunbury. So at the moment it hasn't looked at where we're putting new playgrounds unless they're in an area that's identified as having a gap. So if there's essentially, if it's not a playground that serves an area in about 400 metres is the figure that we use, then we'd be looking at how we install playgrounds in the future. The public open space strategy is also looking at what we need to do to our existing playgrounds, whether they need to be upgraded and brought up to a contemporary standard or not. In this particular case, there is another park with a small playground in it, located about 150 to 200 metres away. So it falls within the catchment of existing playground area.
Thank you. Speaker against the recommendation here. Councillor Smith.
I speak on behalf of Councillor Cook, who's not here tonight. I think he was the councillor who placed this item in here. I think the thinking behind this was that it would be a playground that was accessible by the children, disabled children at Morrissey, but also accessible to the children around that part of Bunbury. So I don't have an alternative motion. I just really wanted to speak against the motion and just to give a bit of background about the issue. Thank you.
Speaker for, Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I use that particular park with my seniors. Okay, thank you. And I find it to put up a playground there, I think it would be quite dangerous. And the reason why I say that is because in winter, not far from there, because you've got the lake, you've got the distance to the cars, if mum's away, to the actual park. It really is just a recreational area. It's not leaning towards having play equipment there. You've got the rail bridge, which you've got another walk bridge underneath that. And fortunately for our executive, when I let them know that it's extremely slippery, they are down there immediately to scrub it, and you're going to encourage children to go and play around that area with adults and with not adults. With the play equipment there, I think there are more suitable places. This is about the one play area in Bunbury that I would say don't encourage your children to play there because it's dangerous. You've got the water, you've got the slippery bridge, you've got the railway line running through there, and you do have that little other playground area which is in a much safer spot. So I'm wondering if in fact the executives of past have come up with the thought that better to move it away from the water area and from that bridge, etc. So that's the only reason why I'm against this. In my heart, I just really feel that it is too dangerous an area to have unsupervised children playing there. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against?
Just a quick question, Mr.
Councillor
Mayor,
Hayward.
if I may. I'm just wondering if this is voted down without any alternative, whether that leaves all the options still open.
That's what I'm hearing. I'll get the CEO to confirm that.
Mr. Mayor, there's an allocation for playground upgrades in the long-term financial plan, but for picking, and I think that's where the public open space strategy needs to be developed, so that there is some prioritisation around where those funds should be spent next. Notwithstanding that this one may come up in the rankings, or it may sit quite low in that prioritisation.
I'd like to speak against the...
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm going to speak against it because I hear what Councillor Kelly is saying, and the concern is that that if we do support it, it says that the council's made a decision not to support it, which may make it difficult to support it in the future if that's what needs to happen. So I suggest the best way for us to move forward is to simply vote against it without an alternative, and then it can continue on into the future.
Speaker for. I'll put it all in favour, please indicate. 3 against. That's lost. We move on to executive recommendation 22. Speaker against. Councillor Hayward.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Sorry about that. I would like to speak against this one and foreshadow an alternative which I have sent through. The Bunbury Park Run attracts, I think we had 112 runners last Saturday. They're runners from all over the state. It's really quite a bit of a tourism opportunity. People do come specifically to run at different parkrun events. The $30,000 is not a lot of money. I'm quite confident it actually could be found within our budget, and I'd like to see our officers see what they could do. The other thing is that when this piece of infrastructure is not being used on a Saturday morning for parkrun, it would be available to the public to use as a picnic space or some shade at the space there at the sorry, mental blank there. At the Big Swamp. Thank you very much. At Big Swamp. It would be available during the week for people to use the Big Swamp. So again, I think that's a good use of an asset, and I would encourage people to vote this down and then consider an alternative. Thank you.
Councillor Steele?
Where exactly do they want to put it? Or is it wanting to go, please?
Do we have any idea? Mr CEO?
I don't have any clear idea. I'm not sure if the Director has any further information. It was just a request for infrastructure.
Against it then. We're talking about the Big Swamp, which has loads of trees all around that area. I can't support it because across the road there's about 3 or 4 places where they have the picnic areas already with a shaded area. There's trees, and $30,000 I'd like to see elsewhere.
So you're actually speaking for the recommendation, Councillor Steele? Yeah. Just a question.
Sir, apart from the obvious,
Councillor Steele, just excuse me for a second. Okay. Just a question to the CEO. With the Big Swamp master plan, with infrastructure we've got in that, would the infrastructure we've got proposed in the master plan provide a space for these runners to have some shelter when they do their runs?
Probably look for some assistance from the reserve bench, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Harris.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Look, I'm not 100% sure. There is certainly shade structures proposed in the Big Swamp master plan of various sizes in various locations through there when we look at the redevelopment of that area.
Thank you. Councillor Steck, did you have a question?
Thank you, sir. You've partly answered it for me as part of the Big Swamp master plan, but also given the fact the CEO has already alluded to this evening that there is already on foot the public open space review, I would suspect that it would be silly to support this until such time as we see something else from those reports, sir.
So let's be clear. I'm asking for a speaker against the recommendation. Is okay. I'm now going to put recommendation 22, which is that council not support including the parkrun, the proposed parkrun infrastructure. All those in favour of the recommendation, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against? That's carried. Thank you. So we move on to recommendation 23. Is there a speaker against this recommendation, which is not to support it? I'll put it all in favour. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Recommendation 24. Is there a speaker against this?
Mr Mayor, I'm not speaking against it, but could I have a little more information? I'm not quite sure what I'm voting on there. What precisely is it?
Mr CEO, is it elaborate in the report, I think?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it was one of the attachments that was provided previously to elected members from the elected member requests, and it sought to see a major investment in one of our heritage areas or buildings to bring that up to the highest level. Councillor Kelly, I believe, submitted that and may wish to comment on it further.
Oh, Councillor Kelly, I invite you to elaborate on what that project is. Do you wish to take a few minutes?
I'll just take 60 seconds, Mr Mayor, or even less than that. What the proposal was to put one project that related to heritage within the city onto the budget or into the budget so that we could use that as an example of what we are continuing to do with heritage throughout Bunbury. We've just won a couple of awards for heritage in Bunbury, just announced last week. So the idea was to put a figure of $250,000 in there. We have a number of heritage places that the council is responsible for. that could be done up as an icon project. I hate the word, but that's what it would be. $250,000 would enable us to leverage another 250, perhaps from the Heritage Council, so that we could do one project as a flagship project, Mr Mayor, and that was the notion behind it.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against this recommendation?
Mr Mayor, for all of the
Councillor
reasons
Kelly?
I just outlined,
Yeah.
yes, I'll speak.
Okay.
I'll speak against it. I will put the alternative up that council support, including the Heritage Key project at a cost of $250,000 in 2018-19. Of course, Mr Mayor, it may be that if I can also foreshadow an extra bit on the end of it, subject to matching funding, Mr Mayor, to make it a little bit more palatable. Better still, subject to external matching funding, and that could include the feds, or it could also include the state. And a project that you may be looking at could be Anzac Park, for example, which I'm sure would attract federal funding somewhere along the line. So, Mr Mayor, I think to build on the momentum that we've gained in Bunbury with our good heritage work in the last 12 months, particularly acknowledging the work of Lacey Brown, who put a lot of effort into our Heritage Advisory Committee, that if we allocate this fund, $250,000, subject, and I'm just looking at it here, foreshadow motion that we support, including the Heritage Key project at a cost of, subject to matching external funding is the extra bit on there just to help out there. Mr Mayor, I think that if we weren't able to find that matching funding, then obviously nothing lost, but it would give us a really great opportunity to build on the work that we've done. Yeah, Mr Mayor, I'll vote against Executive Recommendation 24 and ask councillors to do so also, and then I'd like to move the alternative if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the speaker for the recommendation? Councillor McGuell.
I will, Mr Mayor. I'll be voting against putting this forward and the alternate. Those who have been paying attention might realise that I've voted against spending most money here tonight. Not the fact I don't think they're all fantastic ideas, they are, as is this one. The fact is that we have a bottom line to maintain, and maybe there's the accountant coming in on me and being a little bit tight, I don't know, but we've basically had a bottom line of a surplus of $250,000, I believe it was, at the start of the night. We've gone well and truly past that. That's not to mention that our staff can't find some ways, but to add this again is just going to continue to push that budget. Even if we did get that alternative funding, which may or may not be out there, it's still $250,000 of this city's funds that we need to put forward, which, as I said, which is going to be an increasing tight budget to find. So I won't be supporting it just due to the fact that at this stage we can't afford to pay for this. Thank you.
Speaker against the recommendation?
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Smith.
Heritage is one of my passions, Mr Mayor, and I'll be voting against this recommendation and supporting Councillor Kelly's alternate recommendation. Thank you.
I'll speak for the recommendation. We've been very fortunate over the years to attract quite a bit of state heritage funding for privately owned buildings, as well as the museum, the city-owned building, and each of those grants have been around $100,000. And part of the grant from the state government is that they are matched. Councillor McGuell is quite correct. At the moment, these projects so far is just on paper, we've gone over the money we had available for additional project considerations if they all get up through the budget process. $250,000 is about just over 0.5% of a rate increase, and that's the way I'm looking at things now. If the figure was much lower, then it possibly could get some support, but $250,000 cash is a significant impost on our budget, notwithstanding the fact that we can attract state government funding for heritage projects, and we've been very successful at doing that, as has the private sector. Further speaker against this recommendation? I'll put it all in favour, please indicate. Those against? That's carried. Recommendation 25, there is a speaker against. Councillor Hayward by a whisker.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. I do want to speak against this, and I have foreshadowed an alternative motion. The amount of money is not a lot of money in our budget, but the potential asset that we have in that old basalt quarry is huge. And I just think that if we are going to be a can-do council, we need to encourage our councillors, and Councillor Brown brought this one to our attention, and he has only been a councillor for a short time, and I think it's really important that we engage with our new councillors and support some big ideas, and this is a big idea. It's a small amount of money to get in and have a look, and I think that it will be money very, very well spent. So I will be speaking against the executive recommendation and urging other councillors to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker for the recommendation, Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It is an excellent idea. There's no two ways about it, and it's quite exciting. However, we need to kick some goals first, and we have these wonderful ideas, but we aren't bringing it home. So please put that on maybe for next year. And for this year, let's kick the skate park goal. Let's kick a couple of other goals and use this $25,000 to assist with that. And next year, I'm hoping that we put it on. But yes, it's an excellent project to look at, but not this year. Thank you.
Speaker against, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Millions of years ago, Bunbury was given a gift from its turbulent volcanic history, basalt. For 40 years from the turn of the last century, basalt was mined for building and road foundations at Rocky Point, also known as Whyalla, and located at the western end of Symonds Street, less than 500 metres from this very room we sit in tonight. In the 1940s and 50s, it was a popular swimming destination for locals and tourists. Some councillors in this room may even recall those days. The mining and tourist history created a totally unique asset, being a giant basalt hole in our beach, which has been buried for almost 70 years. Like in the past, I believe this former quarry pit can provide new foundations for future generations and become an iconic tourist magnet for Bunbury. From reviewing photos and survey evidence from the 1950s, I uncovered that the basalt quarry holds water and covered an area 150 metres long and 50 metres wide, a surface area the equivalent of 4 Olympic-sized pools. It is unclear how deep it was, but anecdotally could have a depth of 8 metres. This project will explore the shape and depth of that pit through a geological geometric survey. From this, modelling can be carried out to explore the options for the site. Perhaps a rock sea pool can be created by the simple removal of beach sand from the hole. What value do we put on a big basalt hole only metres from the ocean next to a 100-year-old recreation ground which adjoins the CBD? From my perspective, the options are endless, and the community need to know what sort of asset we literally have on our doorstep. In brief, I would like the council to invest $25,000 to explore what this asset has to offer, and this figure is based on advice from local engineers. Finally, and extremely timely, was yesterday's announcement of the multi-million-dollar Cottesloe Beach upgrade, and at the centre of their project was the identification of a suitable site for a sea pool on their beachfront. We may already have one. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking about this project. While this pales into insignificance when compared to the worthy items that have been recommended for this budget, there may be a time in the not too distant future that we can find some money to explore this buried treasure right in our own backyard. I urge elected members to vote against the executive decision on option 25. Thank you.
Speaker for the recommendation, Councillor Kelly.
Yes, Mr Mayor. Look, $25,000 out of our budget is another amount that's going to accumulate, but I just want to get back to Councillor Brown's idea, whereas I admire the idea of doing a scoping study of the old basalt quarry. I can tell you now from long experience of that back beach, that's a dynamic coast. You might take the sand out, and I can tell you exactly what's going to be in there after the winter, a whole heap more sand. I got a feeling that spending $25,000 on some sort of geophysical survey study of the hole with the sand in it would be an exercise in academia. We would find out how much sand is in, how big the hole is, and then we'd work out that it's an impractical project for the city to undertake. And I don't want to be negative about projects that are suggested by the councillors, but knowing that coast, having had a long involvement with that back beach and natural resource management for quite some years, I can see that this would be $25,000 to tell us that on a dynamic coastline the hole will fill up again and we'll have to clean it out, so on and so forth. I too also looked at the Cottesloe beach pool, and quite rightly their pool is set back. It's a different type of coastline and it will be managed beyond the impact of a wild sou'wester in Western Australia, which happens all the time, and as we all know, they wouldn't put one on their beach because their beach disappears right up to that pavilion every year. So on the basis that a scoping study will use $25,000 of our ratepayers' money to tell us what is the obvious, in my view, I don't think it's a good investment. I won't be, I'll be supporting the executive recommendation as is. I will, however, end by saying that if Councillor Brown or any other councillor is able to pursue private enterprise money to do this task, or even to the point of going to the UWA, perhaps asking Professor Pitarachi, who's done most of the coastal processes down here one way or the other on Geograph Bay over the last 35 years, I think Professor Pitarachi has been about. It may be an excellent project for a master's student or a bunch of students from UWA to come down and using their skills actually map it out and give us some sort of report. But spending $25,000 on a scoping study out of our ratepayers' money when Councillor Miguel's already pointed out that we're starting to get back into the red, I think at this point is not a good investment. So I'll be supporting the executive recommendation, Mr Mayor.
Speaker against? I'll put the recommendation which is not support. Those who support the recommendation, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those against? Carried. Recommendation 26. Is a speaker against that? I'll put it all in favour.
Sorry, sir, I just need to declare proximity interest because my property sits at the bottom of Walters Heights. So.
Thank you, Councillor Stick.
Mr Mayor, can I just ask a question on that? It may have escaped my attention. Was the cost formally costed at $35,000? Or was that a sort of guesstimate?
Councillor Kelly, I'm not sure, but I'm halfway through taking a vote on this, and once I ask for the vote to be taken, that ends discussion. So we've been lenient. I'm going to put that recommendation, which is not supported. Please indicate. That's unanimous. Oh, sorry. Against is 1.
Thanks.
We move on to recommendation 27, councillors. Is there a speaker against this?
Mayor.
Councillor Smith.
Mr Mayor, I'm speaking against this motion, but first can I apologise to Councillor Miguel. I really love accountants. I didn't really want to use that. I'm against this recommendation because the Eisteddfod is not only a cultural event, it's an economic event. It brings hundreds of people into this town, and performers and their parents. They spend money in the cafes, they spend money in accommodation. So I believe that it's not only a cultural event, it's an economic event. And also, at its 60th anniversary, I believe we should support this event that's been an ornament to Bunbury for all of those years. Thank you.
Speaker for the recommendation, Councillor Grell.
I just have a quick question. It might have been in the report, I didn't see it. Did the Eisteddfod apply through the grants thing that we have going through?
CEO. Director.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. The Eisteddfod applied last year through events funding, and I think they secured it was around the $20,000 mark, so they were successful in achieving funding through the event funding round.
So speaker for this recommendation, Councillor Warnock.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just picking up on what the Director said, The Bunbury of Stedford is very welcome to continue to apply for events funding. That's why it's there. And the reason why we channel everything through the events funding round is so that all events can be assessed on a level playing field. And that's the way I think we need to do it for good governance. They do get funding. They've always received funding. And we're, on behalf of the BAG, I know that we're all very keen to continue to support the Stedford, but I'd really urge councillors not to fund events outside the events funding round, because that does set a precedent and it encourages other people to go through the back doors as well. And we really want to encourage everyone to go through a process so it's fair for every community group and other event organiser in the city. So I'd urge councillors not to support the executive recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah. Speaker against? I'll put it all in favour, please indicate. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4 against. That's carried. Thank you. And number 28, is there a speaker against that? Oh. Yes, Councillor Smith.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I speak against it, but I guess we should ascertain who actually owns it first. The information I was given that the city owned it, and that's why I put that recommendation forward.
Yeah. Speaker for the recommendation. I'll put the recommendation. All in favour, please indicate. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4 against. That's carried. Thank you. Okay. We move on to 10.4.1. Councillors, thank you for that, the way we went through 10.2.3. That was very good. We have the recommendation there, so I'm prepared to move it. The executive recommendation 10.4.1. Councillor Steele, is there a seconder? I'll second it. Councillor Steele, do you wish to speak? I don't have anything to say. Speaker against? Councillor Hayward.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. I did foreshadow an alternative recommendation for this item, and I would like to speak against and encourage councillors all to vote against this recommendation as it stands. The basis of the current plan that's being put to us is that we should invest our money in technology that scares the birds off our city buildings and allows them to land on a private building where they can munch away wires, cables and anything they like. And frankly, I'm quite unhappy about that prospect. There's no question that scaring birds away from our city buildings simply puts them onto other people's private property. And I think that as councillors that's something that we ought not to be supporting. The other thing is that it does talk about trying to eradicate, I think, around 200 birds per year, but that is not going to be enough. The rate that these birds breed at, according to the briefing that we were given, will see us, we have about 1,000 of these birds now. In 3 to 5 years we could have 3,000, and losing 200 each year is not enough to stop the spread of this pest. So I'm concerned about that. I think we need far more drastic action in this space, and there are other options available to us. There are other options available to us as a City Council to consider, and I think that we should be investing in eradicating these birds. It is a subject matter that brings a lot of emotive response. It's not nice killing animals, but the reality is that these birds are attacking our vegetation. They're taking away the habitat of our native birds and animals, and ultimately they will continue to cause a nuisance and a massive expense. We have a moment in time right now, the City Council has a moment in time to make a real difference in getting on top of this problem now. If it gets put off, or if we use only or primarily methods that are ineffective in terms of reducing the numbers of these corellas, then we're going to be in big trouble. So I'd urge you to vote this executive recommendation down, and off the shadow that there's an alternative coming, which I've sent by email to everybody today. Thank you.
We'll just pause now, councillors, while our officers try and recover the alternative so we know what that contains. Councillor Hayward, can you read out your alternative recommendation, please? I'll ask Councillor Hayward to read it.
Thanks very much. The alternative recommendation reads that Council notes the City of Bunbury introduced Corella management strategy proposal and thanks staff for their efforts. 2, considers an allocation of $50,000 during the budget deliberations for 2018-19 to only be used to fund the destruction of corellas. Requests that the CEO seeks a permit on behalf of Council from the State Government for the destruction of 400 corellas in years 18-19 and a further 400 in years 19-20. Requests the CEO prepares a report for Council on the success or otherwise of the cull prior to future funding being considered, and requests the CEO write to the Premier of Western Australia expressing concern and disappointment at the lack of action undertaken by the WA Government regarding corella management issues in the Bunbury region, in particular the recent cost shift to local government since the declaration of the corellas as a Category 3 declared pest, which places the responsibility on landholders to undertake measures to reduce the impact of the pest and reduce its distribution.
Thank you. We'll just pause. Just take your time, Katie. Just pause now and we'll get everything correctly typed up. Just the CEO in number 3, Mel. CE, request a CEO. And repeated word. So how are we going, Councillor Hayward? Does that reflect your alternate motion?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, is there a speaker for the executive recommendation? Councillor McCleary.
I've just picked up, and if you'd like to go to page 20 of 35 of the introduced Corella issue papers, The problem that we have is that these birds are really clever. And it also says that with the roost shooting, it's not recommended until the population has been reduced through other methods to 40 or 50 individuals. And I can't see how, and pardon me if I'm being inappropriate here, I can't see how $50,000, that is the alternative recommendation, is going to make any difference when we haven't actually worked out how we're going to eradicate these birds. Once we find out how we can do that, then we could get into it. So I don't think at this moment that this is the appropriate time to, we're going cart before the horse here. We first off need to find out how we can get rid of the birds, then we need to invest the money and do it snap, quick, smart. So I'm going to stay with the executive's recommendation with a strategy report at this time, because more investigation needs to be done, and unfortunately in that time, of course, more birds are going to breed. But we also got to remember that the birds have lifetime partners as well. So there's a thought there that they shoot the partners, that they feed the females. It's all written in our strategy here. So as much as I understand the desperation to get rid of these birds, I don't think throwing $50,000 at what are we throwing it at is going to make any difference. We need to do more studies as to how we can actually make a big impact. Thank you.
Speaker against the executive recommendation, Councillor Morris.
Let's assume that the Shire of Dardanup, Harvey and Capel do exactly what the executive recommendation here will recommend, in which they move the birds from one section to another. That's going to be pretty good. We'll have one bird going here, another bird coming back, and it will just continue to be a rotation of the birds going from one shire to the next. When we talk about what is required to exterminate, I think that when we say to the executive, we want them exterminated, we want them culled, that's an operational matter. They've got to find a way to actually achieve that goal. We're setting the policy to actually say we need to get rid of these birds. When they're causing tens of thousands of dollars of damage every year, not just to city assets but to private assets, the $50,000 is a true investment in relation to saving our assets within our city. Moving them from one place to another is not going to solve the problem. All it's doing is transferring the problem to another area. What we need to do is find a way to solve the problem, not transfer it. Thanks.
Speaker for the recommendation, Councillor Steele, do you wish to close? I'll put the executive recommendation. All those in favour, please indicate. Those against? That's lost. The alternate recommendation, Councillor Hayward, is there a seconder? Councillor Kelly. Councillor Hayward.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. I think I pretty much said it all. I just point out that the $50,000 was already in the previous one, and it's for budget consideration. And there's no, I just agree with what Councillor Morris said in terms of, I'm not saying that there's a particular method of exterminating these birds, but the reality is that something does need to be done. And again, we have a moment in time, so I'd urge you to support it, and let's see a reduction in these birds, and it will make us a better community, and our community will appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I think I've got a good reputation concerning environmental issues, so I'm going to speak to that solely. Councillor Morris has pointed out damage to human assets. That's the assets of the City of Bunbury and private enterprise. One of the biggest damages that is occurring from these corrals is damage to the environment. That is where they're taking nests, they're harassing other native birds, creating a problem for the environment that we live in. So we can't resolve from that one, and that's why I would be supporting Councillor Hayward's alternative recommendation. Firstly, part one, noting the City of Bunbury introduced Corella management strategy, and thank staff for their efforts. I thank the staff for the efforts that they have made. Considering the allocation of $50,000 during the budget deliberations, to be used to fund the destruction of corrals, we have to do it. There's no alternative. I did the simple maths with 1,000 of them out there breeding at the rate they are. By the time we get rid of 200 a year over the next 5 years, we'll end up with about 3,000 of them. That's just simple mathematics. It's an exponential. And unfortunately, that's the path we have to go down is for the destruction. So that covers part 3. I still think that we're going to have to do some really hard work, and we're going to have to really talk to our neighbours as well, because birds obviously don't respect the city and the Shire borders. The report for the council is absolutely crucial because it is an operational issue, and we need to know for our constituents what's happening out there to be able to report on it regularly. And writing to the Premier is an absolutely great idea to get some action at a state level. And I just remind people of the demise of the APB, the Agricultural Protection Board, quite some years ago. Once upon a time they used to have blokes, because they were blokes, stationed at the border of Western Australia and South Australia with pea shooters, 22 should I say, to make sure starlings didn't cross the border. They took it very seriously then, and even biosecurity now is taken extremely seriously by word of mouth, but not so much by action when it comes to ensuring that we're not allowing pests to get away in the environment. I suppose it's safe to say that once a pest becomes an economic prerogative for either a farmer or for people in the city, then suddenly there's action on the economy, but I'd prefer to argue on the side of the environment here. So, noting the report and introducing these measures and handing it over to the CEO and the capable staff to liaise closely with our neighbours in the Greater Bunbury region to ensure that we get something done about this, because mark my words, if we don't take some action now, the problem 5 years down the track will be much larger, and then 5 years down the track much larger again, and in the time what we lose in environmental assets in the southwest Bunbury and the southwest will be immeasurable. So I encourage councillors to support the alternative alternative recommendation, and let's move on with it as soon as possible. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Speaker against? Councillor Stick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't support this alternative recommendation for the principle that number 4 says the cull and prior to future funding. Now, this seems to be the only method is to cull. There's no option there to capture and swap or capture and give to other sources as what we used to do in the past. This has not been a problem of councils that's come on our doorstep in the last 5 minutes. This has been around for over 10 years. Every single year we've had this problem. Every single year. And I've seen a bit of email traffic in the last 6 months, but I can tell you this, it's been around for 10 years. And if you're going to cull 400 birds a year, well, that's only a drop in the ocean of what you should be doing in conservation of preserving species of anything. I mean, you have a look, and we're talking this evening about humane and emotive things. Well, cane toads, look at them. And the culling things for those is horrendous. But I don't put cane toads in the same species or the same pest management as corallas, because you can have a look at the red-tailed cockies, how wonderfully they are. But they do a lot of damage in the environment too. So what do you want to propose, to get rid of all of them as well? I don't think so. As human species, I think that you need to have a look at other alternative ways of living with other species, and I don't believe that this is our only option. Of course they're coming to our areas because we've got water and we've got green grass. It's very simple. And it's not true to say that the only cause is those that are killing off other bird species. We do, by our own existence. So I'm suggesting we find other alternative ways as well. And I know a former councillor that used to be here years ago actually proposed trapping and sending them off and selling the birds. We're not looking at any other option other than culling, and I don't like the fact that we look at one word, exterminate. It's pretty grotesque. And my son, who turns 18 this year, and I've been in council all the time since he's been 1, he looked at the newspaper on the front page last week and said, "My God, Mum, are you seriously proposing that council will issue guns to kill birds?" Have a good look, people.
Speaker 4. Councillor Hayward to close. I'll put it, oh, sorry, here we go again, no. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. The reality is, it is ugly. I completely agree. And my young son loves those birds. He loves seeing them down the road there. But the reality is they are causing huge environmental damage. Something is going to die. It'll either be our possums in the trees or it'll be our native wildlife and birds. The ecosystem is being stripped bare by these birds, and it will continue to get worse unless we act now. As I said, it is a moment in time right now for us to be able to do something. I was contacted during the week. Other councils are taking a more direct approach. I'm not suggesting that they have to be hand out guns and be shot. What we need is an eradication of the numbers of the birds. Now, I know that they are shooting them in Stirling, City of Stirling, which is a residential space, and they're doing other methods as well. And some of those methods, I guess, if this goes through, the CEO will talk to the people involved and come up with a solution. But ultimately, if we do not stop these birds from growing in their size, they will significantly detract from the quality of our city, and they will significantly attract the quality of life for our native animals. So it is unfortunate, it's ugly, I accept all of those things, but I think that we need to make a pragmatic decision about what the best future is for our city, and do what we can to protect our native wildlife as well. And so on that basis, I'd urge you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Now the CEO has just asked me to clarify that the corellas will be clarified as being the introduced corellas, which is declared a pest. So I just wanted to make that point. I think everybody's happy with that. So I'll put it all in favour. Please indicate. Those against? 2 against. That's carried. Thank you. Item 11, Councillor Steck, I believe you're seeking leave of absence for the dates. Have we got the dates there?
4th of April to the 2nd of May.
Oh, there we go. Someone prepared to move that leave be granted? Councillor McCreary, Councillor Steele, all in favour, please indicate. That's carried unanimously. Questions from members. We have those questions from Councillor Steck, Councillor Steele. Councillors, that concludes our meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. 13 point. Yep. Mr. CEO. Thank you.
Through Mr Mayor, the questions are printed in the agenda, the answers are printed in the minutes. And we'll provide it to you and to elected members in hard copy as well.
So, I'm now declaring this meeting closed at 7:27 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate your time and attendance.